Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Yes, please. I've got like that to go into the next bit where you can.
You do not. Oh, wait.
And then double time after.
No.
Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Koda Nitai Mayapura Shashi ki, Shri Ramachandra Bhagavan ki. So thanks everyone for coming up to the temple today, and if anyone's online there, and welcome to Krishna Bhavan online. Thanks for joining us. So today we have the celebration of two events. One is Ramanavami and one is the 25th installation anniversary of Shri Koda Nitai Mayapura Shashi. And of course Ramanavami was just a few days ago, and the actual arrival of the deities came on Ramanavami. And they were, although they were actually installed before they came here, so we'll get into that in a minute, but a few days later we hurriedly put an altar together, and then they were made the first public appearance. So Sunday seemed to be a good day to do it, although it wasn't the actual calendar day. So we're merging these two festivals together, Ramanavami and 25th anniversary of the Deities coming to Scotland. So I don't know if I can sit somewhere where I can see that slides. Okay, because I don't think, because if I sit there, my back will be to them. Nothing I can do about it. Do you have the slideshow there? Do you have a picture of Kunsundu there? Okay. Alright, so first of all, we'll just explain what today's program is going to be. So, there was a kirtan there. Ian and back to kirtan, Ian and Felix, of course. And I'm going to give a little intro to how the deities came to Scotland. Then there'll be a drama. This drama has been done many times before and by Ramanavami devotees many times before, but Javet's done he's done a revival of it with a new twist. Right, could we ask all the devotees to put their phones on silent, please? It kind of breaks the concentration when we're speaking, and it's just, I know we're getting old and we're getting forgetful, so this is just a reminder for everyone. And typically, I remember reminding everybody to put their phones on silent, and as I was making the announcement, mine went off. So that's my disclaimer. Getting old. Yeah, so the Boatman Scholar drama is going to be done with the Ramanavami last minute productions. And involved in that drama will be Javet, who rewrote the script, and Gora. Sachi's doing some sound effects. Jennifer Priya is going to be there as the mother of the boatman, who happens to be the mother of the boatman anyway. And Felix. Anyone else? And John. That's good. So it's going to be a blockbuster presentation. And I'm sure even our dramas, if we try to do serious dramas, they end up being a bit of a laugh anyway. The first time we did a serious drama, it was Jagai and Madai, and as soon as the hoax came out, everyone started laughing, because we'd never done a serious drama before. They just thought, oh, here we go. It's going to be a comedy, but it's alright. And then after the Boatman's Scholar, then Ramananda Prabhu is going to give a talk about Deity Tattva, or the whole concept of deity worship, the practice of deity worship, and what it means to devotees in different circumstances, how we can relate to the deities when either we're living at the temple, on the altar, as a Pujari and Brahmin, or as a first initiated or even uninitiated. We can all be connected to the deities. And so Ramananda will give some nice talk about that, how we can understand the deity as a Supreme Lord and how we can render service in any position. And then there will be a bhajan, Parama Karuna, which is speaking about the glories of Koda Nitai Mayapura Shashi, Nitai. And then there'll be some Ram Leela, life lessons from the Ramayana, and the Hokshipa will be presenting that today. And then there'll be a little bit of time for some stories, reflections, realizations about the deities here. So don't conjure up anything, just to look good. Let's keep it real. It's about the deities, we're glorifying them. And then there'll be some Bhakti Steps certificate awards today as well, and to recognise and encourage devotees who are taking steps forward in Krishna consciousness. And then Vrinda will lead a bhajan, Ayodhyavasi, which is a very nice bhajan glorifying Lord Ram, his abode and his associates, with the Mahamantra. And then there'll be a prasadam feast. So for those who are at home, I hope you've cooked your feast already. Otherwise we'll send you a nice photograph of the feast and you can honour it with your eyes. Okay, so we'll just begin by explaining about how the deities came to Scotland. So once upon a time, as all good stories begin with, there was a Garanga Campaign going on in Scotland. Hands up anyone who doesn't know what a Garanga Campaign is. Don't know. Okay, so what it meant was that we were chanting Garanga, and we were getting everyone else to chant Garanga, and we were doing this in quite a big way. It was quite a huge campaign for years. We could actually spend a few nights speaking about this, but we'll just give a few highlights. So typically we had double-decker buses with Garanga, call it Garanga Be Happy on them. And we had quite a few buses around, double-deckers, single-deckers. It was advertisements in the Tube in Glasgow, the Tubeway, subway, and we were doing Garanga festivals. And on the street, as well as doing books, we were selling paraphernalia with the name Garanga on it, like Garanga stress balls, wallets, pens, fridge magnets, so many things there. Even teddy bears we're thinking of, so many ways just to get the name of Garanga out there. And people were, generally in the advertising world, when people are advertising something, they have what they call a saturation point. And because we had really put a lot of effort into it, then some of the marketing companies who are working with, they said, okay, you've gotten beyond the saturation point. But of course, the whole name of Lord Garanga knows no saturation point because it's not a material thing. It's Anandam Birivardhanam, ever-increasing ocean of transcendental bliss. And people were feeling that. So when we were on Sankirtan, we were on the street selling books, distributing books. Then we used to get everyone to say Garanga, but not only say Garanga, we'd ask them to shout it at the top of their voice. So people would regularly be doing this, and it was causing quite a stir, not in a nasty way or anything like that. People were liking it. It was brightening up their day, to the point where as soon as somebody seen a devotee on the street, they could be 100 or 200 yards away, they just shout Garanga at the top of their voice. Garanga. So that was going on all the time in many places throughout the north of England and the whole of Scotland. And we had Garanga stickers everywhere too. So, and even to the point where non-devotees were using it just as much as the devotees. They didn't even know where it was coming from. There was so much speculation because they call it Garanga Campaign as to what was it meaning. Because this is another thing I guess about advertising, is that when you don't reveal what it is about, it creates some kind of mystique. It's like, oh, what's this? What is this? So people were speculating, call out Garanga Be Happy. It must be a new plumber service. You know, when you get a burst pipe, you call out Garanga. Or it was a new cigarette brand, or perhaps it was a new Alka-Pop drink or something like that. And so there's so much speculation going on. And even some kids decided on their own to do their own thing about it. You was seeing it, you know, it was actually being spray painted in a couple of places. And of course that wasn't the devotees. Anyone can do whatever they like. We can't be held accountable for that. Disclaimer. So meanwhile, so this was going on for a few years. Meanwhile, in Berkeley, California, there was a temple there, and it was mainly devotees from the Bhaktivedanta Institute. Bhaktivedanta Institute are a group of devotees who are in the scientific department of ISKCON, where they write books and they hold conferences and they liaise with other scientists discussing matters like the scientific basis of consciousness. And this is something which was Prabhupada was considering was very important in order to gain the confidence of the scientific community to explain Krishna consciousness in scientific terms. There's even one book which one scientist devotee Sadhaputta wrote called Mechanistic and Non-Mechanistic Science. Has anyone ever read it or tried to? How did you get on with it?
Two pages.
Yeah, basically the whole book is just like a scientific equation, a mathematical equation, and you look at it and you think, unless you're like a maths professor, then you think, okay, well, he must know what he's talking about. Oh yeah? Did you understand it? Shuranga read it?
No, I also didn't read it.
But I was fortunate enough to have his association, and he's one of these devotees who's just, his level of intelligence was just another level altogether. You could understand what he's saying when he says it, and you think, oh wow, that's far out amazing. And then as soon as you leave his association, you're like, what was that again? But within that scientific community, so those devotees were living in this temple in Berkeley, California, and they were unable to look after the deities any longer. So in fact, we just got some contact with one devotee who used to serve those deities. Her name is Mirabai, a Prabhupada disciple. And she served them from 1992 to 1996. So let's go to the slideshow and we can see the deities from the beginning. So here in 1984, they were being installed. This is a fire yoga here for the installation of the deities. And the devotee who's supervising the installation ceremony is Bhakti Damodar Goswami. If you get a chance to read that book, Life Comes from Life, that's based on morning walks with Srila Prabhupada and this devotee. A very wonderful devotee. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But, next one. So these are the deities actually being installed. Abhishek, first Abhishek for them. So this would have been in 1984, and that was in the Bhaktivedanta Institute campus. It was Gurukul campus in a place called Philo, California. So the deities originally were fashioned in New Vrindavan, and if you look in the New Vrindavan website, you'll see the Nitai there are the same, taken from the same mould. And actually, I don't know if anyone remembers, there was a devotee here, the Gurukul devotee Jai Chaitanya, a few years back. JC, we called him, Jai Chaitanya. His father made those deities, so we're trying to find out some more information for historical purposes. And as far as he knows, it was only 2 sets of deities made. There's a story behind that, but it's a bit long, so I won't go into it just now. So these are the deities on New Vrindavan altar. And you can see the position of their hands. Now most Gaurnitai deities are like this, and for some reason they're like that. Does anybody know the reason why? Does anybody know the speculation why?
It's the year they were coming to Scotland.
And they needed an umbrella. Oh yeah, that's it. And apparently, and so why they're like that in New Vrindavan then?
Sorry, it's the year they were coming to Scotland. They were both made at the same time.
But they're not both in Scotland. Anyway, it was a good speculation. Yeah.
Lord Nityananda is more merciful, so he's also from Marga.
Yeah, I've heard a few speculations, but I actually haven't heard anything from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So this is also another reason why we wanted to get in touch with the devotee who actually made the deities, so we see is there a particular reason why they're made like this. And I heard some stuff before, but I can't verify it, so I didn't want to repeat it. What's the next one?
Wow.
Yes, so very nice deities. And this is their altar in Berkeley, California. And so this is shortly before they came to Scotland. So in GBC meetings, International Society for Krishna Consciousness has a governing body commission, which is a group of leading devotees who meet once a year. Other times as well, but generally they meet once a year. And they discuss many things. And one of the things in 1996, meetings of the GBC was concerning these deities that no one could look after them any longer. And would anybody like to have them in their yatra? And Balabhadra Prabhu, he offered that we would have them. So generally these things take some time. This would have been around the Gaur Purnima time. And we expected there'd be some connection with them. And then some months would pass before things came underway. So we didn't think much about it, we just kind of waited on it, whether it would happen or whether it wouldn't happen, and what kind of arrangements would we have to make, etc. And then on Ramanavami in 1996, which was a few weeks after Gaur Purnima, then the devotees went out in Sankirtan, and the plan was to come back for the evening festival, and because usually the festival would be in the evening, fasting till sunset, etc. at that time. So we had a big minibus, and we used to have sometimes like 12, 13, 14, 15 devotees going out in that bus. And when we arrived back that evening, then I was greeted in the driveway by Balabhadra. I thought, this is unusual. He's standing waiting on us, coming in the driveway. He says, okay, everybody out, somebody clean the bus, turn it round. And I said, what's going on here? He says, the deities have arrived. What deities? Gaur Nitai deities. So there's an interesting link here actually, that the deities arriving on Ramanavami, the appearance of Lord Ram. The connection with this is that Krunabhavan is known as Krunabhavan because of the original deity, who was our worshipful deity for many years, known as Krunasindhu, Sri Krunasindhu Bhagavan, who's here. This lovely shalagram. Now that shalagram, Shila, was worshipped as a Rana Ram or King Ram. So, and the devotees were very fond of this deity of Lord Ram. So on Lord Ram's appearance, then he decided to manifest himself as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If we look at the picture here, we'll see the form of Sadbhuj. Sadbhuj means 6 arms. 2 arms of Lord Ram, 2 arms of Krishna, and 2 arms of Lord Chaitanya. So one and the same person. He appears at different times for different purposes and in different moods. So the same Lord appeared as Lord Chaitanya on Ramanavami. So we arrived in Glasgow Airport and we went through all the paperwork, etc. And the office was soon to close. There were some complications with the paperwork, something hadn't been filled in, there was some fee to pay or something like that. But so hurriedly we managed to fill it in because we were thinking we didn't want to leave the deities there unattended. They just arrived that day. And didn't want to take a risk that anything may happen. So we pushed that we could get them released that day. And then just around the time as the office was closing, just about to close, then they gave us the release papers and we managed to get to the warehouse, get the container out. It was too big to fit in the bus, so we had to open the container, take all their paraphernalia and their outfits and stuff it on the shelves of the bus, and then put Koda and Mayapura Shashi on the front passenger seats. So it seemed like they wanted to see Scotland on their arrival. So it was quite an amazing scene actually, driving the minibus with the Lord as the passengers. It was like a Rath Yatra. And then we arrived back, and we put the deities in the room, which is my office at the moment. That used to be where Karuna Sindhu was and where the other Shalagams were. So we quickly just put some marble tables out and we put them there. Made some offerings, and we decided that we wanted to hurriedly install them, well not install them but place them in the temple room. So the temple room at that time is what is called the studio at the moment, and we didn't have a proper altar, so we within a few days Acharya Prabhu had built a new altar and they got new marble, etc. So within about 6 days on Vasant Rasa, then the deities made their first public appearance. Yeah, so it was considered that after everybody calling Garanga for some time, then the Lord decided this is where he wanted to come. So this is the first outfit which was made for them here. There's many outfits that they came with already, but they were a bit worse for wear, and this is the first one which was made here in Scotland for the deities. Is there any other pictures? And this is one of the outfits which they came with. And the small deities here, you'll see they're different from the deities which are on the altar at the moment. So those deities are actually being worshipped by Prema Manjari, and she has them in her house. If anyone speaks nicely to her, they might get a darshan when the lockdown's over. And so they're a good bit smaller than the ones here. And the reason for having these other ones was that the authorities at the time that were here wanted that the Utsava or festival deities, as they're called, would be similar looking to the big deities. Quite often the Utsava deities just get ignored and nobody really takes darshan and pays attention to them. So, and I'm sure Prema's not complaining because she's got Koda Shashi Mahi deities. Okay, these are some other outfits which came with the deities. That one was actually made here. Next. And this is a more recent outfit of the deities when they were moved up here. And so they moved up here in 1999 for Janmashtami. Any more? It's another nice outfit. So you can just go through them. So that's I think that's about it. Anyone get any quick questions about that? About anything about the deities' arrival or anything about these deities? Can maybe give a minute to that if there's anything, otherwise we'll go to the next part of the program.
You said that Charadeshna, he made a new altar.
Yeah.
Is this the one that...
No. Sorry, when I say that, what it was is there was a kind of elliptical marble top, and he made the framework for it, and other parts for the curtains which were behind the deities as well. But that was in another building before we moved up here. But this altar was made in Gujarat. Gujarat, yeah, was sent from there. Okay. So now we'd like to... It's drama, right, okay, we can do the drama now. So Shashi Kontama Prashashi ki Jai, Shri Ramachandra Bhagavan ki
Jai.
So this is a drama called Boatman and the Scholar. And how long will it take to get it up?
Through 15 minutes.
It'll take 15 minutes to set up.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll leave you with Srinivas.
John, can you help us? This is the day it's going to get started.
Do you need
It's
the...
on that's supposed to
We'd
produce.
like
Where do you
everyone
want
to
this?
sit over here so that we're watching the screen. So all the notice can come.
What? You need to announce to everybody you're just talking to. You're just talking to.
If all the devotees can move to this side of the temple room so that they're facing the TV screen. Yes. Take this microphone off here, Ramanath, for now. Take this one off, or shall I leave it on? Leave it on?
Why do you want to take it off?
Well, don't know, please, I'll leave it on.
In case you leave it, I can control it, like start, I think.
Serious Ramanavami.
And then we're gonna on the live thing they're gonna see Swami, then I'm playing and posing and everything.
Who's this? Who's You're a lockdown community, you have quarantine for 10 days. Quarantine for 25 years. For the pleasure of the devotees and Shashi Koli time Hare Krishna, Shashi we have boatman and scholar.
Bravo!
It's in India, so Indian Bhakti time applies.
Leave that on the screen for now, it's fine.
Hello. Robert King, a brilliant young anthropologist from Edinburgh, won a prestigious scholarship to teach in the Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan. Hearing that some of his tutors were on a sabbatical in nearby Darjeeling, he traveled to meet up with them. He had a proposition for the recently retired Harry McPherson.
It's so good to see you, Professor. Now that you've retired, you'll have more time to fulfill some of your burning desires.
What on earth are you talking about, Robert?
Well, I've been reading some of your papers that you wrote in your postgrad days. You were pointing to a kind of covert knowledge filter that was inherent in those universities that were becoming ever more dependent on financial assistance from the hard materialism camp.
Shush, Robert. Don't you dare share those articles. If my alumni find out, I will be the laughing stock of Meadows Walk.
But Professor, those articles gained great reviews from a scholar called Richard L. Thompson, who was the author of books that were sending shockwaves through global academia.
On hearing these names, our professor became horrified, and from the safety of his colleagues' decadent circle began hurling vitriolic comments at Robert.
That's not science. That's eclectic hodgepodge. It's pseudoscience. It's woo, pseudoscience.
Robert left and prepared for his journey to Kolkata, where he was to meet Michael Cremo at a conference.
What a nightmare that was! After such a spiffing holiday with my alumni in that beautiful hill station, a train came off the tracks.
Manish is a boatman from Navadvip. Today he collapsed out of exhaustion and fell sound asleep in his boat. Normally, at this time of day, his mother sends a family member down to the harbor with some nice lunch for him. But hearing the gossip from the neighbors, she decides to go herself. On approach to the harbor, she sees a wonderful scene.
What a wonderful scene. Look at all these boats with the pilgrims. My Manish must be making a fortune. Let me see how he's getting on. Manish! You missed all the pilgrims that were not on the train. Instead of working, you're sleeping here, you lazy boy. Come on, eat this khichdi and then get back to work. I got a message from my sister in Krishnanagar that the train derailed from Darjeeling, and apparently it's full of rich English academics. So make sure you catch a few of them and work. No, keep this. You might need it later.
What a nightmare that was, and I've been walking in circles now for a few minutes. After that such a spiffing holiday with my alumni in that beautiful hill station, a train came off the tracks. Oh well, anyway, let's keep a stiff upper lip, eh? Aha! Here's the Ganges at last. Ah, a boatman! 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 Do you know who I am? I am Professor Henry McPherson. Could you, do you think you could get me across to Navadvip?
Yes.
And how much is the fare?
80.
80 rupees. Oh, well, that's nothing for an important scholar like me.
My apologies, sir. VIP tariff only 80,000 rupees today.
What? Oh well, here, that's nothing. Here, take it. There's 75,000 rupees. I hope this boat is seaworthy.
Oh, yes.
Eureka! Did you see that? That was an excellent example of Archimedes' principal displacement of water. Do you know anything about science?
Oh, yes. Every day I catch a seminar on the science of Krishna consciousness.
What a load of claptrap. That's not science. You're obviously completely lacking a decent scientific education. You've wasted 25% of your life.
Shut up.
Did you hear that? That was definitely the call of a green-winged, red-throated, three-toeded flycatcher.
You mean the parrot?
The parrot? The parrot, don't you know the first thing about ornithology? You've wasted 50% of your life. Oh, shut up, for God's sake. Don't you know anything about music?
Oh yes, I'm going to get to chant Hare Krishna.
I'm not talking about your colonial fertility rights here. I'm talking about real music. Beethoven, Mozart, Bach. Why, you insolent scallywag, you've wasted 75% of your life. Do you hear that? I should have heard it before, but I can hear it again. That is a green-winged, red-throated, three-toeded flycatcher.
You mean the parrot?
The parrot?
The second parrot.
No, it's not the parrot. Don't you know anything about ornithology at all?
No.
Well, you've wasted 75%, 85%, 95% of your entire life. Do you see that? Do you see that over there on the horizon? That is a cumulonimbus cloud formation, often seen just before a big storm. Oh no! The water's coming in the boat. I thought you said it was SeaWorld.
I never said it was river. No, this Professor will have to swim.
But I can't swim.
Take shelter of the holy name.
But I don't know anything about the holy
You wasted
name.
100% of your life.
Oh no!
Perhaps it was the merciful glance of Sri Mayapura Dam and the purifying waters of Mother Ganges. But as it happened, the stormy water swiftly threw the professor up onto the sunny shore of Prabhupada Park.
Koda! Koda! Do you remember the last time we had a storm like that? There was a lot of interesting things washed on Prabhupada Ghat. Let's take our bikes down with the cart. Look, there's a body over there. I think I saw some movement. What shall we do?
Well, let's chant Hare Krishna in case he is close to leaving his body.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Rama Hare Hare.
Look, he's opening his eyes. He looks blissful.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.
Actually, when the professor went under and was in his final moments, his whole life had been passing before him, and he saw himself with his devout mother as she asked him to always offer respect to God's children wherever he met them in his academic travels. She must have envisaged his inquiring mind leading him towards moral degradation or even atheism. Mortified by the consequences of that memory, a genuine prayer had risen for his heart while realizing his offenses to the boatman. He grasped the dire urgency of the moment. Remembering Manish's parting words, he called out,
Hare Krishna! Hare Krishna!
Hearing that pitiful cry, Mother Ganga carried him to the shelter of her Lord's dear devotees. Seeing the beauty of the two boys and hearing their rejuvenating welcome, the professor did indeed believe he had died and been transported to the heavens. His jacket had been washed away, and so the boys wrapped him in a chadar.
Welcome to the spiritual world.
I am Gaura.
I am, do you know, I don't know who I am. Yesterday, I think my name was Henry McPherson. Henry McPherson.
I think he's thirsty.
Yeah.
No, Henry McPherson.
I think he's hungry too. Should we give him some prasadam?
Yes. Good on this.
Gora. Come here quick, Gora. I don't think we will be able to keep him thinking that he's in the spiritual world.
But Mayapura is a spiritual world. That's what we'll be singing in Bhajan classes today.
Shri Ganda Mandala Bhumi Java Jana Chintamani.
How beautiful. You know, when I was a young boy, we used to hear the Bible stories, but my friends would make fun of me, and I wouldn't have the courage to stand up to them.
No, Hare, you had the courage for your distant knowledge. Krishna sent Srila Prabhupada to England more than 50 years ago, but perhaps by that time you were fully enlisted in the ranks of atheistic academia. So he built a spiritual city for you, Hare. Physical truth in his.
Yes, Hari. Yes. Let me show you the spiritual city. We have books on every subject and teachers who can explain them perfectly to you.
As the super soul in Hari's heart, Krishna reminded him of the content of the controversial aspirations for truth and compassion. Controversial papers he had written in his early career. He had been nourished by his mother's prayers, but had his aspirations for truth and compassion cynical academic establishment.
Come, Koda. Let's take him to the planetarium.
McPherson's paper on knowledge filters. Jutakarma was amazed at his insights on knowledge.
Our good friend Robert, illusions related to the senses.
Yes, Professor, our spiritual master designed this amazing city that we see now, and he created the good children right from actually are in the spiritual world because they're like satellite dams all over the world. So let's join the Scottish devotees. So we hope it doesn't require an explanation.
No, it's
if it does require an apology. So thank you very much for your patience, and please forgive us for the inadequacies of the production and direction. And please give a big round of applause for all of the actors, and especially for
Bravo!
And especially for Ramanavami and for tolerating me throughout the week.
When you take your props back there.
So
we'd just like to invite Ramanavami to give a talk on the Deity subject. And I believe with Ramanavami, Shashi Koda time after Shashi Ki.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Is the mic online? Hare Krishna. Okay, so I've got my notes. Excuse me. Right. So so in the Bhagavad Gita, which is the real sort of essence of Krishna conscious teachings. The Bhagavad Gita has 18 chapters, and the first 6 chapters deal with mainly Karma Yoga, and the last 6 chapters deal mainly with Jnana Yoga. And then in the middle is the real sort of purpose and meaning of the Bhagavad Gita, which is Bhakti. So Bhakti is sometimes described as being like an affair of the heart. But Krishna also teaches us how to use our head and how to use our body also. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, altogether these constitute my separated material energies. And then apart from this, there is another superior energy consisting of the living entities, the spirit, soul. So Krishna teaches in the Bhagavad Gita that the real goal of life is to awaken what is in the heart, awaken the spiritual love which is in the heart. But he also teaches, like we were seeing here, that the professor was learning that as well as awakening this yoga of love within the heart, we can also see how to use our head and how to use our body and how to use everything in the world in a way which is in service to Krishna. But the real goal of the Bhagavad Gita and the real goal of spiritual life, the goal of the yoga ladder, is ultimately to awaken what is in the heart, to awaken the love which is in the heart. So when Lord Chaitanya appeared 500 years ago, in order to teach us how to awaken this love from within the heart, then he sent his principal followers, the 6 Goswamis, but he sent them to Vrindavan. So Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Raghunath Bhatta, Raghunath Das, Jiva Goswami and Gopal Bhatta Goswami. He sent these devotees to Vrindavan. So Vrindavan is the land of Krishna. Vrindavan is the place where Krishna appeared 5,000 years ago. And it's the place where he performed his most confidential pastimes of childhood and youth with his most confidential devotees, the residents of Vrindavan. And Lord Chaitanya sent the Goswamis to Vrindavan with a particular mission. He asked them to go to Vrindavan and uncover the places of Krishna's pastimes, which had been hidden in the thousands of years since Krishna had been there. And then he also asked them to write books on the science of Bhakti Yoga and to establish deities, to establish temples and places of worship. So Lord Chaitanya really wanted that this principle of deity worship and temple worship be an important part of the Sankirtan movement. And then we can see that 500 years later, when Srila Prabhupada travelled all around the world to really establish the mission of Lord Chaitanya, then he really took on that spirit of Lord Chaitanya's mood. He tirelessly, for hours, he gave up eating, he gave up sleeping practically, so that he could give us this incredible library of books on the science of Bhakti Yoga. And he travelled around the world, and very, very early on, even when his
students were very, very young and very inexperienced in the practice of Bhakti Yoga, very, very early on, he began to introduce the process of deity worship, because he understood that it's such an important aspect of practicing Krishna consciousness. So does anyone know who was the first deity who Srila Prabhupada gave to us to worship? Anyone know? Who was the first deity in ISKCON? Prabhupada? Lord Jagannath. Whereabouts? Yeah, San Francisco, which is where Koda, Nitai, Mayapura, Shashi are from as well. So yeah, Lord Jagannath. There was actually, just very, very quickly, I'll try not to go off on any of my famous tangents, because we know that Lord Jagannath, when he appears in Jagannath Puri, the story of how Lord Jagannath appeared is that 3 logs of wood appeared on the ocean. Lord Brahma instructed, these 3 logs of wood will appear. They're coming in from the ocean of milk, from the abode of Lord Narayan, and they are manifestations of the Supreme Lord. And so the original forms of Lord Jagannath were carved from these 3 logs of wood that had washed in from the ocean in Puri. And then when Srila Prabhupada first asked the devotees in in San Francisco, when Srila Prabhupada first asked the devotees in San Francisco to carve deities of Lord Jagannath, then one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, Shyamasundar Prabhu, he went down to the local, I can't remember what they call it, like a wrecking yard. It was like where you could just get hold of anything, all sorts of things you could find there. And he asked, do you have any large pieces of wood that we can get from here? And the man said, oh, that big log over there just washed up in the sea just a few days ago, you can take that one. So the original form of Lord Jagannath, who appeared in ISKCON, appeared in a very, very similar way. So we can use our active minds to draw whatever conclusions we want from that. But yeah, Srila Prabhupada introduced the worship of Lord Jagannath very, very early on. And in San Francisco, 1967, 1968, it was the height of the counterculture. So all the hippies actually accepted Lord Jagannath as the worshipable Lord of the hippies. And they would go to the temple in Frederick Street in San Francisco every day, and they would take little offerings for Lord Jagannath: candles, food, fruit, incense, probably some of the weird and wonderful things that the hippies were offering at that time. So whatever they had, they would offer to Lord Jagannath every day. So he became the deity of the hippie movement. And then in 1969, Srila, I think, 1969, you can correct me, either 69 or 70, then Srila Prabhupada installed the first ever large deities of Radha and Krishna in ISKCON, who can say? I know Prabhupada knows, I'm just seeing if anyone else knows. Who were the first large deities who were worshipped in ISKCON of Radha and Krishna? Yeah, Radha Landanishwara. And Srila Prabhupada actually, he did say they were his favourite deities. Yeah, although Krishna is always Krishna, but Prabhupada was very, very, very fond of Radha Landanishwara. So Prabhupada followed in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya by, even though we were not necessarily qualified to worship deities, still he saw it as a really, really important part of practicing Krishna consciousness, because when you have deities in the center of a community, and by center of a community we're not just speaking about a geographical location that those people who happen to live in the immediate vicinity of a temple are the community members. But when a deity appears in a particular place, he appears for that whole country. The deity comes, he's a form of Krishna, he's an incarnation of Krishna, Archa Vigraha. So he's an incarnation of Krishna, and he descends into the form of the deity. He comes from the spiritual world, and when the devotees invite him through prayers, through song, through mantras, through worship, when the deities invite Krishna, he comes and enters into the form of the deity, and he comes to deliver all the people of that land
He comes to deliver the whole people of the land. So when we say that the deity is in the center of a community, it's not just that if you happen to live on Bankhouse Road or if you happen to live on Beechwood Crescent, then you're a member of the community. But Koda, Nitai, Mayapura, Shashi have come to deliver all the people of Scotland. That they've come to purify the whole land of Scotland, and anyone who considers themselves to be a part of the Scottish community of devotees. So wherever you happen to live geographically, if you're attached to these deities, then they are at the center of your lives, just as they are in the center of anyone who happens to live here personally. And when the deities are in the center of the community, then that if we take advantage of that opportunity, then that really brings Krishna consciousness to life within that community. It's a very, very confidential truth, but it's a fact that what Lord Chaitanya has come to give, and then therefore what Srila Prabhupada has come to give, is they have come to awaken within us this consciousness of the spiritual world. That they have come to awaken within us pure love for Krishna in the mood of the residents of the spiritual world. It's a very, very valuable, an inconceivably valuable, priceless, and very, very confidential gift that we've been given. And if we, going back to the Goswamis, going back to Srila Prabhupada, as well as giving deities, they gave their books. And in those books, they teach us what is the culture of the spiritual world, what is the culture of Vrindavan. What happens in Vrindavan, everything that happens in Vrindavan, every single thing that happens at every moment of every day in the spiritual world has Krishna in the center. Everything has Krishna in the center, no matter what they're doing, whether they're milking the cows or whether they're farming the fields or whether they're managing the affairs of Vrindavan, whether they're helping Nanda Maharaj to organize the goings on throughout the community, whether they're helping Mother Yashoda to cook and prepare nice things for the residents of Vrindavan, whether it's the doorkeepers at the palace of Nanda Maharaj, whether it's the gopis out collecting, whatever's happening, everything has Krishna in the center. And this is why deity worship, we speak about deity worship. If you were to Google the words deity worship, like last night we were Googling yoga, and all these pictures came up of all the different asanas, and we were speaking about how yoga is so much more than asanas. So similarly, deity worship, you can Google this word deity worship, chances are you'll find a picture of someone standing to our left of the deities, offering a piece of incense, or offering some food to the deities, or offering of the lamp, or dressing the deities. When we think of deity worship, this is very often what comes to mind. But deity worship is every single thing that happens for the pleasure of the deities, wherever the deities are in the center of that community. So whether we're raising money to maintain the temple, whether we're chopping vegetables, whether we're cleaning the temple, whether we're sewing outfits, whether we're offering incense, whether we're having headaches from having to deal with all the goings on in the place, whether we're doing our social media and online work, every single thing that's happening is deity worship when you have the deities in the center. But and Bhakti Yoga is all about reawakening this mood of love and service in the mood of the residents of Vrindavan. It's all about putting Krishna in the center of our lives. And when the deity appears, that really helps us to actually do that. For those of us who've been here a little while, we have this very good friend of ours, Gadruma Bihari. He lives down in London now, but he was my Sankirtan leader for many, many years. I was very fortunate. He looked after me and trained me. And he used to tell me this story about how when he was a young devotee living at Soho Street in London, and one of his main services was to go out and raise funds from life members. So he would go around the Indian community in London and asking them to give regular donations so that the temple could be maintained nicely.
And every day before he left, he would stand in front of the deities of Radha Nandanishwara, and he would look very, 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 very carefully at the deities. And he would place within his mind a picture of the deities. He said he used to count exactly how many tulsi leaves were on their feet. Was it manjaris? Was it leaves? What colour jewellery were they wearing that day? What kind of rings did they have on the toes? What kind of rings do they have on the fingers? What kind of jewellery are they wearing? How are the chudders placed? You know, all the different details, as much as he could remember about how the deities looked that particular day. And he placed this vision into his consciousness. And then he went out, and throughout the day he would constantly bring back into his mind this picture of the deities to remind himself, who am I doing what I'm doing for? Who am I doing this fundraising for? Who am I sharing Krishna consciousness for? It's for the pleasure of these deities. So when we're speaking about deity worship, you know, to the degree that we're conscious of this personal form of the Lord, then because Krishna consciousness, it's all about establishing this personal relationship. That's what Bhakti Yoga is. That's what differentiates Bhakti Yoga from other spiritual paths. It's really about this personal connection with God. It's a personal connection with Krishna. You know, Srila Prabhupada gave this expression, the supreme personality of Godhead. You know, Prabhupada in his books, just over and over and over again. I remember when I was first here, and our temple president at the time, Prabhupada Vani Prabhu, he was giving class, and at the end of the purport, I remember it's like a little samskara that entered into my mind. He began his class by saying, here in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is engaging in his favourite activity, Mayavadi bashing. You know, this is Prabhupada's mood, is to really establish that the supreme personality of Godhead is not impersonal. The supreme absolute truth is not this impersonal void or this energy, but God is a person, God is a personality. Like Prabhupada says in the Ishopanishad, the supreme absolute truth has to contain everything which is within our experience and beyond our experience to be supreme and absolute. So if we have personality, if we have form, if we have emotions, if we have senses, if we have activity, if we have likes and dislikes, then all of these things have to be present within the supreme absolute truth. And the highest manifestation of that absolute truth in that personal form is Krishna. And this is really Prabhupada's mission, is to establish this personality of Krishna. And deity worship, having deities in the community, really strengthens that conception that the Supreme is a person. And we have to remind ourselves just how fortunate we are, because the things that we're doing here, these are the activities of the spiritual world, and these are activities which in the spiritual world we may not even get a chance to do very often. We're cooking for Krishna every single day. Who gets to do that? Mother Yashoda gets to do that. We might not get to do that in the spiritual world. We're dressing Krishna. We're helping to prepare Krishna's offerings. We're making Krishna's clothes. That's big. You may not get a chance to do that in the spiritual world, but here we're getting a chance to do these incredibly intimate activities. And to the degree that we're conscious of who we're doing it for, to that degree our hearts will actually be enriched with the mood of bhakti. To the degree that we're really thinking about it. Two devotees can be standing side by side chopping vegetables. One of them's thinking about some crazy song that he used to listen to before he became a devotee, and the other one's thinking, I'm chopping this for Koda, Nitai, Mayapura, Shashi. It's all going to be offered to the deities, but our hearts will be ultimately purified to the degree that we're actually conscious of who we're doing it for. So, we can Krishna says in the Gita, at the end of chapter 6, and of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga, and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So this is how Krishna concludes chapter 6, and then he spends the next 6 chapters really opening up that verse, and giving all this information about just how to live this verse.
he speaks all about Bhakti Yoga and actually loving him and worshipping him and rendering service to him and meditating upon him. And, deity worship. Rupa Goswami, he gives the 5 most potent forms of bhakti in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and deity worship is one of those. But all the other activities become enriched when deity worship is at the center. If we're chanting Hare Krishna, we can think of the deities while we're chanting. If we're offering food, that becomes so much more potent, and it takes on a whole new dimension when it's offered to the deities. We can establish a holy place for hearing and chanting, but when the deities are in the center of that place, it takes on a whole new dimension. Everything takes on a more powerful, enriched dimension when the deities are there within our lives. So, to the degree that we develop this relationship with the deity, to that degree, Krishna reciprocates. He says in the Gita, Yeyatamam prapatyante tams tadeva bhajamyaham, that as all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects. So as we surrender to the deity, as we become conscious of the deity, as we render service to the deity in a conscious way, to that degree the deity reciprocates with us. Srila Prabhupada said that if we see the deity as made of stone or wood, then he will always remain stone or wood within our minds. But if we render service to the deity with love and affection, Prabhupada said eventually one day that deity will speak to you. And we see that practically in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. We have the story of Shashi Gopal. That, there was the story of the 2 Brahmins. We're not going to tell the whole story now. We're probably already significantly pushing the clock a little. But, there was the story of the 2 Brahmins. They made a promise in front of the deity of Shashi Gopal. And then later on, one of the Brahmins went back to the deity and asked, please will you bear witness to the promise that was made? Please come to my village and stand in testimony to the promise that was made. And the deity spoke to him and said, I can't come to your village, I'm a deity. I'm standing here in Vrindavan. Whoever heard of a deity walking? And the Brahmin said, well, whoever heard of a deity talking? He said, if you can talk, you can walk. And then Krishna said, okay, you got me, you've defeated me. And then Shashi Gopal walked to the village and stood as witness to the Brahmins. We see also Tota Gopinath in Jagannath Puri. Tota Gopinath is Gopinath, and he's sitting down. And originally he was standing up, but then he sat down. There's different reasons why he sat down, different interpretations as to why he sat down, but it said that he sat down because his pujari was so old and was struggling to be able to offer the garlands, and so he sat down so that his pujari could worship him nicely. There's also, who was the deity who performed the funeral rites for his devotee? Anyone remember? Can't remember. There's the famous deity, and his pujari was very unhappy because he had no son, and usually the eldest son performs the funeral rites for the father, and he was thinking, when I die, no one's going to be there to perform my funeral rites for me. And the deity said, you've looked after me like a father your whole life, I'll be your son and I'll perform your funeral rites. So there's all these beautiful stories. We read the stories of the Goswamis in Vrindavan, all the different ways that the deity reciprocated with them. We could spend the next hour sort of telling all the stories of the Goswamis in Vrindavan. Rupa Goswami worshipped Radha Govinda, and Sanatana Goswami worshipped Radha Madan Mohan, Jiva Goswami worships Radha Damodar. And there's all these beautiful stories of how their deities personally and directly reciprocated with them, spoke with them, interacted with them. So this will happen, but first of all that purification has to take place. That purity has to happen, and the more we are conscious in our relationship with the deity, the more our heart will be touched with the bhakti, the more Krishna will reciprocate with us, and the more this actual culture of Vrindavan will awaken within our hearts. And then Krishna says, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. So if we put the deity in the center of our lives,
And if we worship Krishna in the center of our lives, and in the form of Koda, Nitai, Mayapura, Shashi, or if we're in London, in the form of Radha, London, Ishwara, whichever deities are in the center of our lives, when we put them in the center of our lives, then at the time of death, Krishna will remain in the center of our lives. We'll go back to Vrindavan, and Krishna will eternally remain in the center of our lives, and every single thing that we do will have Krishna in the center. So it's a wonderful opportunity. We could really talk and talk and talk. Well, I'll stop there. So, Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Koda Nitai Mayapura Shashi Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Awesome.
The Gorgeous address just now or we'll at the bus until we just have. Well, it's been a lot of talking, so maybe we'll do the bhajan. Yeah. Short.
That's it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Bhajan, or Song of Devotions by Srila Thakur, Paramakaruna Pahodvijana. So Paramakaruna means supremely merciful. Pahodvijana means these two brothers, Nitai. So these two lords, Nitai Gauracharya, are very merciful. They are the essence of all incarnations. The specific significance of these incarnations is that they introduce the process of chanting and dancing that's simply joyful. And they're actually very happy. All they want is to see us chanting and dancing. This is our service where we're chanting and dancing. We're chanting and dancing to the pleasure of the deities. And we automatically get pleasure from doing that. My dear brother, I request that you just worship Lord Chaitanya Nityananda with firm conviction and faith. If one wants to be Krishna conscious by this process, one has to give up his engagement in sense gratification. One simply has to chant Hare Krishna, Hare Hare without any motive. My dear brother, just try and examine this. Within the three worlds, there is no one like Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. Their merciful qualities are so great that upon hearing them, even birds and beasts cry and stones melt. Now, if you read Chaitanya Charitamrita and other books, you will find pastimes of these things, like when Lord Chaitanya went through Jarikanda forest, when he was chanting, the animals gave up their natural enmity towards each other, and they were chanting and dancing together as pure spirit souls, not as on the bodily platform of lions, tigers, deers, etc. But Lochan Das regrets that I am entrapped by sense gratification, since I have no attraction for the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. Then Yamaraj, the superintendent of death, is punishing me by not allowing me to get attracted by this movement. So this is in Vaishnava humility. He's saying that you have allowed approach to do so, just like in the Shikshastakam. Lord Chaitanya says, you have made approach to you very easy by your lanes, but I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. So this is just a devotee recognizing their own limitations, and it's not that they have no attraction, but they feel any type of impurity or attraction to the material world, they feel it as being some major distraction. So we'll sing this. Paramakaruna Paudvijana Nitai Paramakaruna Paudvijana short a little bit there so we can catch up. And I would now to show a little video clip from our GBC, Praghosh Prabhu, who has a few words to say. He'd really like to be here today. But he's here in spirit and in word and in video. So we have it ready to play?
Yeah.
Play now?
Just 1 minute or so.
1 minute. Okay, so it was a very nice talk that Ramanavami was giving there. And it's good to consider, sometimes we might think, oh, I wish I was a Pujari or a Brahmin, I'd like to go in there. But the thing is, everything we're doing is connected to Krishna. You know, whether you're even if you're a volunteer who doesn't even know that the temple exists, and you're growing something down there, and you've chosen not to take part in any temple thing, you're drawing something, it's coming to the altar, it's getting offered, and the deities are showing their blessings to these people. So, and even if one, this is called Agyata Sukriti, which means that they get the benefit without even knowing it. This is how merciful Lord Chaitanya is, that he wants to benefit everybody. So everything we're doing, everything we own, we offer it to the deities. And it was interesting, a little story about deity worship. I was in Vrindavan at Govardhan, Kusum Sarovara. I was there, it was about this time, 23 years ago, around end of April, beginning of May. It was very hot. This is nothing like it was there. It was like at least twice as hot as this. It was probably around the late 30s, maybe early 40s. And they had a little fan in front of the altar blowing on the deities, and it was just going like this. It was quite slow, and I thought, let me take it apart and see if I can fix it. So in my pride I thought, I'll do something here. I'm thinking I'm the doer. So I took it all apart, cleaned it all up, put it back together, and it was even slower. It was going like this. And so I switched it off. I thought, waste of time. And then I come back and I seen it was back on again. I thought, somebody's not noticed that it's useless. And that was exactly what I was thinking, this is useless. So I went and switched it off again, and then Mataji, the old lady who was looking after the deities there, she came in and says, did you switch that fan off? And I said, yeah, it was useless. She said, you're useless. She said, I said, but it's not even doing anything. She says, well, this is all we've got to offer to Krishna, so we'll offer it. She said, it doesn't matter whether it works or not, we're offering it to Krishna. And I thought, well, this is what you call devotion, that materially can be partly useless, you know, but my consciousness was useless, so I thought, unless it's actually materially good, then it's not worth offering. But I learned a valuable lesson that day, that we offer the best that we have, even if it's not very good. Of course, we don't offer rubbish when we've got better to offer. But the Lord's very kind, he accepts the devotion which we offer it with. So now I think we're okay to show this now.
buses and motorway bridges, etc., and Sankirtan paraphernalia and all of that kind of thing. And it became quite common to hear the word Garanga. Ordinary people were almost using it as a greeting. Devotees would report that they would hear it being shouted in busy streets when they were out doing their business like that. And that campaign was based on Srila Prabhupada's words as he arrived in America in 1965, that the holy name of Garanga will be heard in every town and village of the world. So then it was decided at the 1996 GBC meetings that the Nitai deities that were then in Berkeley in California, actually at that time Berkeley in California, the ISKCON temple was known as Berkeley, and they had different problems and difficulties. So it was decided that those deities would go to Scotland because there were struggles, as I say, in Berkeley looking after them. Up until that point, I think the deity, if you like, that the devotees in Scotland were focusing on was a Shalagram Shila in the form of Lord Ram. So it definitely appeared as more of a coincidence that these deities were actually arriving on Ramanavami. And they were at that time, and still remain, to the very best of my knowledge, the only full-size Nitai deities in the whole of the UK. They were made by devotees in ISKCON in New Vrindavan and installed by His Holiness Bhakti-Srila. That was the original history of them. Very merciful deities, Nitai, and most merciful of all incarnations. And we've often heard how devotees have directly experienced reciprocation to their prayers to Shashi, Koda, Nitai, Mayapura, Shashi. So, Karuna Bhavan has this glorious link, absolutely glorious link, between Lord Ramachandra, who is the ideal king for maintaining and protecting the highest culture of humanity, known as Brahmanya Dharma, and the Lord, in the form of Lord Ram, is specifically the protector of the cows and the Brahmanas, and hence he enhances the prosperity of the entire world. And by his practical example, he showed how to live for the benefit of all human society. He fought with demons like Ravana, of course. He carried out the orders of his father. He remained a faithful husband to Mother Sita, of course. Thus, there's no better or no other comparison to Lord Ramachandra acting as the ideal king. He was just the ideal king in all circumstances. And then, of course, the link between Lord Ramachandra and now this link with Lord Chaitanya, wherein Rupa Goswami, he offers his respects to Lord Chaitanya as Namo Maha Vadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namane Koda Tidasena Maha. That, oh, you are the most munificent incarnation because you are directly giving love of Krishna to everyone. So this is Lord Chaitanya. He's opened the storehouse of love of God. He's just so liberal and so munificent, just wanting to help everybody like that. So now in Karuna Bhavan, you have this glorious connection between these two extraordinary personalities, incarnations of Krishna. So may I bless all the Karuna Bhavan devotees that they can follow in the footsteps of Lord Ram and Lord Chaitanya and become ever increasingly and ever more ideal and munificent and spread the glories of Lord Ram and Lord Chaitanya throughout the whole of Scotland and beyond. Have a great day, everyone. Love to be there. Hare Krishna. All glories to Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, and Srila Prabhupada. Jai Haribol.
Very nice encouraging address there by our GBC. And I think next we have a Tosh Prabhu. Do you read this one?
No, I was just running for the projection. Because you turn the TV off.
Turn the TV off, do we need it back on?
I don't know.
No.
I'm just in the habit of switching it off. Alright, so I would now like to invite Hosh Prabhu, and he's going to speak about the Ram Lila, pastimes of Lord Ram, with some life lessons there. And then we'll have a few minutes where we can share if any devotees have got any stories experiences that they want to share with the rest of those here about their exchanges with the deities here. And then we'll have kirtan and prasad.
Shri Ramachandra Bhagavan ki So these are some notes Acharya put together on the significance of Lord Ramachandra's appearance and the lessons that we're supposed to learn from the book. And so the first lesson, lesson 1 is, just a little bit before that, the narration of the Ramayana was faultless. It was considered the Adi Kavya, because it was the original poem which was in Treta Yuga 2 million years ago, and it consists of 24,000 verses written by Valmiki, who was a great sage, and he was a disciple of Narada Muni. Narada Muni had briefly described to Valmiki the pastimes of Lord Ram, and then Brahma came and asked Valmiki to compose the history of Lord Ram's life for the ultimate welfare of the world. And Lord Brahma gave Valmiki the benediction that everything that was unknown to Valmiki would become clearly revealed within his heart. So Narada Muni had given him a kind of brief outline, and then by the benediction of Lord Brahma, he was able to envision all the details, and so he was able to capture that beautifully in those 24,000 verses. So this narration of the Ramayana would be faultless. And after Brahma departed, Valmiki sat down in meditation to discover all the pastimes of the Lord Ram. He became absorbed in a deep trance and clearly envisioned all the pastimes of Lord Ram within his heart. Then Valmiki composed the Ramayana, and it's an epic poem narrating the birth of Lord Ram. So the first lesson in the Ramayana is the power of bad association. So Dasharatha had 3 wives, Kaushalya, Sumitra and Kaikeyi. Kaushalya was the mother of Lord Ram. Sumitra was the mother of Lakshmana and Shatrughna, and Kaikeyi was the mother of Bharat. And it was a known fact in Ayodhya that Kaikeyi loved Lord Ram more than her own son Bharat, but because of her bad association with her hunchback maidservant Manthara, she became so evil that she wanted Lord Ram banished to the forest for 14 years. So whenever I listen to this part of the Ramayana, I always find it very difficult, because you see how she becomes more and more twisted to the point where she becomes so hard-hearted, Kaikeyi, that even though she causes the death of her husband Maharaj Dasharatha. So that's the power of bad association. It's somebody who was had a very beautiful personality and such a sweet loving relationship with her husband and with Lord Ram, and then how the whole thing became so distorted. So that's a lesson for all of us, that any of us, however qualified we may feel we are, if we're not careful about how and who we associate with, then we can fall prey to that bad influence. Because Manthara was full of envy, then by associating with Manthara and listening to her poisonous words, Kaikeyi also became full of envy and selfish. Although she had so much love for Lord Ram, she became full of hate and envy towards him. This is how powerful association is. And the next lesson is attachment to service and not to the position. So Kaikeyi, to fulfill her selfish desires, asked Maharaj Dasarath for 2 boons, and the chariot that Maharaj Dasarath had been riding on, the wheel broke off, and Kaikeyi put her hand inside the wheel to keep it spinning round, and so Maharaj Dasarath was able to defend himself. And he turned around after the battle and he said, okay, you saved my life, I'll give you 2 boons. And she said, I don't want them, I don't need them. And so later on she said, oh, do you remember those 2 boons? And then the 2 boons she asked of him was that Ram be exiled to the forest for 14 years and that Bharat be installed instead as the king. So attachment to service and not to the position. Lord Ram was willing to become the king as a service to Maharaj Dasarath, and he was also willing to go to the forest as a service to his father. He was attached to the service and not to the position. We can analyze, are we attached to the service or the position it gives us? So that's a nice one for anyone that has a position in ISKCON, or a position in anything, in anywhere. Are you doing it for the right reasons? Lesson 3, goal. The goal is to please the Lord. When Lord Ram went to the forest, then Bharat found out what had happened in his absence, and he was devastated. He went to the forest and asked Lord Ram to come back to Ayodhya and accept the throne. But Lord Ram wanted to fulfill the words of Dasarath Maharaj, and so insisted that Bharat return to Ayodhya and rule the kingdom. For Bharat wanted to stay in the forest, which for him was easier than to return and rule the kingdom. But he followed Ram's order to please him. So we usually like doing things which give us pleasure, but the goal is to give Krishna pleasure. And sometimes that means giving up our selfish desires. This can cause some pain, but if it gives the Lord pleasure, then we should do that. Lesson 4, the Lord is the proprietor and we are just caretakers. Bharat, when he returned to Ayodhya, he took with him Lord Ram's shoes, or padukas, and placed them on the throne. Bharat was ruling the kingdom on Lord Ram's behalf. He never considered himself the ruler, he was only the caretaker. Lord Ram is the real proprietor, and he can give or take away. The caretaker acts according to the will of the owner. So here we can learn that we shouldn't think we are the proprietors or owners of anything. Everything is the Lord's, and we are just the caretakers. Lesson 5. Anybody can make a show of greatness. The reversals test us to see who we are. So when Lakshman cut Supanika's nose, she couldn't keep the beautiful form she'd assumed to charm Ram and Lakshman. She manifested her real ugly form. This was their normal, horrible form of a Rakshasi. In the same way, we will show our real nature when tests come our way. Hopefully we won't get our nose chopped off. How much are we able to tolerate provoking situations? This will test our greatness. And as one very famous thinker said, what lies before us and what lies behind us are of tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Lesson 6, Bhakti cannot be achieved by deception. Here Bhakti is Sita Devi. Ravan wanted to kidnap Sita Devi by deception, but he gets Maya Sita instead. So the real Sita, she was kept in the sun planet, and false Sita was manifested to protect her. So we cannot get Bhakti by false means. Bhakti is independent, and we can only get Bhakti from a Bhakta or a devotee who has Bhakti. So by the mercy of the Lord and his devotee, we can get Bhakti. There is no other way of receiving Bhakti. Ravan represents materialists who want to enjoy Lakshmi Devi for themselves, but that's not possible because Lakshmi Devi always wants to reside with her husband Narayan. So the materialists are like Ravan, separating Sita Devi from Ram. On the other hand, Hanuman represents a great devotee who wants to have Sita with Ram, unite Sita with Ram. We should follow in the footsteps of Hanuman and not Ravan. So anyone who has a lot of Lakshmi that's online just now, you're very welcome to send it along, and we use it in the service of Lord Ram. Lesson 7, obstacles on the path of Bhakti. When Hanuman was crossing over the ocean to Lanka in search for Sita Devi, then demons came to stop Hanuman during his jumping over the ocean. When Hanuman jumped, he pushed that hard into the ground to jump that his feet left huge holes in the ground as he spread out into the sky. First came Menaka, a gold mountain, tempting Hanuman to seek comfort and take some rest before continuing his journey. So Hanuman declined the offer. He wanted to complete his service to Ram first before he had any rest. So Manika was temptation to seek comfort before achieving our real purpose. Next, Simhika came. She was a shadow catching demoness. She caught Hanuman's shadow, but Hanuman killed her. So while striving for bhakti, people may chastise, criticize, or misunderstand us, but we should have the willingness to tolerate and continue with devotional service. Then there was a serpent called Swasa, and she had the benediction from Lord Brahma that whoever came before her, she could eat that. So she said Hanuman would also have to enter her mouth. So Hanuman kept expanding his body, and then all of a sudden he shrank to the size of a thumb and quickly darted in and out of her mouth. So he kept intact Brahma's benediction and at the same time didn't get eaten. The Swasa represents envy of people in high position and trying to stop their progress. This is jealousy of the mind. By devotional service we have to devour Swasa, who represents envy. By chanting and hearing and serving the Vaishnavas, we can become free from envy in the heart, and, as I already quoted from Srimad Bhagavatam, especially by hearing the pastimes of Lord Ram, we become free from the disease of envy. And lesson 8 is, arrogance cannot understand well-wishers. The world is a mirror of our own consciousness. We see others through the eyes of our own false ego. Ravan was thinking Mandodari, his wife, was envious of Sita, but actually he was envious of Lord Ram. When we think we know, we are not willing to listen to good counsel. Spiritual progress means simplicity and humility. If we are lacking in these, then we won't listen, thinking that we know better. That was Ravan. No matter how much good advice and good counsel he got, he didn't listen because he was so proud. Pride comes before a fall, and Ravan lost everything because he didn't listen to good advice. We should cultivate the ability to accept good counsel that will help us in spiritual life. So Ravan had 10 heads, and each head was specialized in a particular department. He had one head which was for traveling, so if he was going to go on a journey, then he would consult with that head, and then he had another head for this, another. So all the heads were telling him, give Sita back, and the only head that wasn't in agreement was his actual own head, and he was saying, nope, I'm not going to. So that's interesting, isn't it? If you think about sometimes you get a bit mental about something, you're not sure what to do. Imagine if you had 10 heads. Lesson 9, when Hanuman and the monkeys were building the bridge across the ocean to Lanka, they were writing the holy name of Lord Ram on each stone, and the stones floated. In this way, they made a bridge of floating stones. So big or small, all the stones floated by writing the name of Lord Ram. Similarly, whether we are a big devotee or a small devotee, we can swim the ocean of samsara by chanting Lord Ram's holy name. Lesson 10, hearing about the Lord revives our dormant love for him. Lord Ram, being Paramatma in the heart of everyone, including Ravan, could have killed him just by thinking of just by striking off Ravan's, or turning off Ravan's heart. But the Lord in his pleasure potency, Sita, went through this whole ordeal, so we can hear about the Lord and revive our dormant love for him. And lesson 11, welcoming the Lord in our heart with lamps. This is the Diwali or Deepavali festival. Lord Ram is welcomed back into Ayodhya with lamps. Diwali is not just physical fire, but lighting the heart with light of Lord's grace and the process of devotional service. When the heart is fully illuminated, then we can experience Lord Ram within ourselves. When our love for the Lord awakens in that love, comparison, the love for all of the living beings awakens. Then Ram Raj, or the kingdom of Ram, is awakened within the heart and then in the world outside. These are some of the lessons we can learn from the Ramayana. Although there are many more lessons, but we will need another festival day to describe them all. So we can pray to Lord Ram for protection from lust, Ravan, the embodiment of lust. We can pray that Lord Ram kill the lust in our heart, destroy all the bad propensities so that our heart and mind may become clean, so we may peacefully worship the Lord. The best way is to chant Lord Ram's names and Krishna's names, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And there's a beautiful verse, Vikridita Vrajavadubhaya. I don't know the rest of it just yet, I'm still trying to learn it. But if you meditate on the living pastimes of Krishna, then by hearing about these beautiful pastimes, all the lust is washed away from the heart. So we shouldn't be too preoccupied with whatever the unwanted things are that are there in the heart. We should become more absorbed in the positive things that we want there in the heart. And if we keep pushing out the negative and aspiring for the positive, then eventually that will wash away all the dirty things in the heart. Shri Ramachandra Bhagavan ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi.
So I believe the next part of the program is we're asking devotees if they'd like to share any memories, experiences,
past times with again unenlightened sahaja related to the deities. So let's get the ball rolling here. Rolling a little bit. Any reflections and things? So I just want to say that Srila Prabhupada said that we can, if we have some problem, we can approach the deities, we can approach Lord Nityananda, and these are Prabhupada's words, my dear sir, I have this problem. So we can approach the Lord like that. And sometimes we only go to the Lord when we've tried everything, and then we're totally exhausted, and then we go to the Lord. But we don't have to wait till we're on the last straw. We could go before. But one time I was on the last straw. There was one devotee who was a capable devotee, and he was being maintained by the temple. But he, at the same time, he wasn't keeping his agreement up. He wasn't doing any service at all. He was misbehaving. And I tried so many different ways over months, and then finally I just said, okay, well, I can't think of anything else. I just prayed to the deities. I said, my dear sir, I have this problem, my dear Lord. I've tried everything I can think of, and I never thought to pray to you. So please, if there's something you can do to help his situation, because I was feeling sorry for the devotee, but he couldn't see that I was trying to help. He was just seeing what he wanted to see, and he was a bit of a skiver, to put it mildly. Anyway, the very next day, he came to me with tears in his eyes, apologising, and he said, oh, I'm really sorry, but the way I've been behaving, and I want to do things right, and I want to keep to my agreement. And immediately I just thought, why did I have to wait to the last straw? Why not go to Lord Nityananda first? And so I had that experience with the deities reciprocating. Of course, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it says that even Lord Nityananda, sometimes if the devotees please him by service, then he may even feel like, generally we don't approach the devotees and the deities for fulfillment of material desires, because that's not what they're there for. They're not like demigods. They're not like Santa Claus or your mum and dad who you just go running to, you give me this, give me that. But we're praying to them for advancement in our spiritual life. That's the main thing, that we can improve in our quality of spiritual qualifications, etc. But sometimes even the Lord will fulfill our desires, but he won't fulfill them if he thinks it's going to do us harm, because he's our well-wisher. So sometimes he will fulfill our desires in such a way that is inconceivable to us, that then we give up the desire and then we desire something greater. So anybody like to share anything? John?
So my realisation is that all you need in life is a little bit of faith in Krishna, a little bit of Shraddha. Just try and have that for Krishna, and he'll work miracles for it. Because I remember when I was in Leeds, the female devotee called Navami Radha. She's Godruma Bihari's sister. And her mission in life is just to get people to say Garanga. That's really all she does. Everybody she comes in contact with, she'll say, "Can you say Garanga?" So she got me to say Garanga a few times. What I've got was a bit Garanga, yeah.
Back to John is the fruit of the Garanga Campaign. Very well. Very nice story, thank you.
Yeah, and it was interesting because when the deities came, they were down in the. I mean, I can't imagine how it was possible now, but they were in the, which is now the studio. And if you go into the studio, you wonder how even you can get into the studio. And the temple for devotees, and at that time there was 15 devotees, maybe more, and
we even had 30 devotees in that temple at times.
Yeah.
And somehow or another we were running up and down Kirtan.
And so, but what was amazing was the deities were moved up to here where they are now, and I came into the old temple room, and it was everything had been cleaned out, and it was just a feeling of total emptiness. It just felt so hollow, and although I hadn't so much been conscious of what it was when the deities were there, I was very conscious of what it wasn't when they weren't there, how much life and vibrancy they created, such a charged atmosphere. So that was an amazing experience. It was like going from a live body to a dead body, and that the soul had now left, and what was left was just a shell, and it was just another ordinary room, like so many other millions of rooms in millions of buildings all over the UK. But when the deities are there, then it was a portal into another dimension where infinite possibilities were there within our reach. So that was amazing.
Realization, thank you. Anyone want to share? Laura?
A photo came up on the slideshow of the deities, and it was the day of my first Janmashtami that I attended. So that was really, really nice to see. Also, I was really grumpy a few days ago, so I made a point of coming in to see the deities every time I passed the temple room. Instead of just walking past, I would come in and I would have a little chat with them, and I would ask them for a little bit of help. And since then, things just have picked up again, and I'm not grumpy anymore. So thank you.
Yeah, to do reciprocate. Anyone else? There's one story that before these deities came to Scotland, the room which was my office was the Shalagram room in Kroon Sindhu, which the Shalagram was seen there. He was the deity there, and I was in that room once, and my mind was quite doubtful on that day. I was thinking, perhaps this Krishna conscious malarkey is just a very nice story, a very elaborate story with all these books, and perhaps the deities are just stone and they are just wood, and it's just my imagination. And it's always been quite doubtful. And then I began to consider, well, what do I trust then? And I thought, well, I do trust Srila Prabhupada, I trust his words, I don't think he would cheat us, and I believe what he says. So what does he say about the deities? He says that if you see the deity as stone, then you're stone-hearted. If you see the deity as wood, then you've got a wooden head. And I certainly was being a bit wooden-headed that day. And then I thought, okay, what else does he say? He says, if you bow down to the deity and treat the deity like the Lord, then he will reciprocate with you. So immediately I bowed down, and all my doubts just disappeared. It was very purifying, and I felt very much not elevated as in puffed up elevated, but I felt like I had been somewhat elevated from that doubting situation just by putting faith in the words of the spiritual master. And this is how Krishna reveals himself in the deity form, then we follow the instructions of the spiritual master, and we perform our service, which is prescribed duties, then that's connected, it's coming from the deity, and this is pleasing to the deity. If you please yourself, then that's a different category of pleasure. But when we do service to please the deity, and we see it in connection with the deity, because the deity is not just in the temple, the deity is present everywhere, and he's wherever you want to see him. The deity is our authority in life. I'll share another quick story. We were doing Sankirtan. For those who don't know what Sankirtan is, we can relate to it as standing on the street selling books about Krishna consciousness. So some places we used to go to in Scotland, the authorities there didn't have a problem with us, and other people, they did have a problem with us, and sometimes they tried to stop us. So one time devotees were in one particular town, and the local police came along and said, you can't be doing this here. And they said, under whose authority are you doing this? And the devotee pulled out a picture of the deities. And then, of course, the police did a couple of jokers out. Of course, the same devotee pulled out a picture of the Lord of Singadev once as well. So to the devotees, the Lord is the supreme authority. Of course, it doesn't mean to say that we go and break the law and we have no regard for the law. But we see the devotees are concerned with pleasing God first and foremost.
So, another story which is kind of on the whole subject of the deities themselves. In the Prabhupada memories, there's quite a few devotees who mention that when Srila Prabhupada stood before the deities, although they couldn't so much see the deities or appreciate the deities were not different, they could see from the way Srila Prabhupada was looking at the deities that he could see that they were not different. So they couldn't directly see the deities, but they could see the deities through Srila Prabhupada seeing them. Anyway, one time Srila Prabhupada went into a temple room, I don't think it was an ISKCON temple, and he said the deity has tilak in his eye, and the pujari went over and he came back and he said, no, I think you're mistaken, Srila Prabhupada, or Swamiji, whatever. And so Prabhupada said, no, if there is. So the pujari went back, and he looked really closely, and it was the small deity, and then sure enough there in the corner of the eye was a little spot of tilak, and he took it out. Now from where Srila Prabhupada was standing, unless he'd had a pair of binoculars, he would not have known that there was a bit of tilak in the deity's eye. So the only other conclusion you could draw from that event is that the deities asked Srila Prabhupada, could you ask the pujari to take the tilak? So this is, for a pure devotee, he sees the deities, he speaks to the deities, and the deities can interact with him just like we interact with each other. So that's what pure devotees are able to. So maybe we can't appreciate that so much, but at least we can follow in their footsteps. And one day, it's said that if you worship the deities all your life, then one day the deities will speak to you.
To share another story. You finished with that? You finished the whole story?
Yeah, I'm finished.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that one. Yeah, I'd like to share another one generally about deities. So I think it was 1996. No, it was before 96. 95, which is different before 96. I was thinking, we were travelling Sankirtan most of the time. And for many years I was always desiring to have deities to take travelling, Nitai deities. And I was thinking, that's interesting that whenever we see, so Lord Chaitanya, he spent 24 years as a householder and 24 years as a sannyasi, which means shaved up, living the life of a mendicant. I was thinking, but we never see any deities of Lord Chaitanya like that. We never see him shaved up. We never see him as that second half of his life. And as I was thinking like that, there was one devotee in India from Kundabavan, and little did I know, he was bringing back a little deity of Lord Chaitanya called Nilchal Mahaprabhu, who was shaved up, and when he came back, and I've been thinking of this for some time while he's away, funnily enough, and he came back, and then Balabhadra says, I've got somebody who wants to meet you, and he pulled out Lord Chaitanya like that, and I thought, unbelievable. it just shows you how the Lord will reciprocate sometimes with your desire. And one other thing, just a little story, is related to Radha at Bhaktivedanta Manor, where Srila Prabhupada was there. So earlier on we were talking about how it's the devotion in the offering which counts, even if our material situation is not so good, we just offer what we've got. So that doesn't mean to say we offer any old rubbish. Our standard of service is lazy, lackadaisical, half-hearted, like that. It's a devotion which we're offering, not our own ease or our own lack of expertise or whatever. So Prabhupada was at the manor in his room upstairs, and the devotees were in the temple. They made an offering, fallen off the tray. And Prabhupada said, "Was it burnt?" And he went and asked. He went away. And I came back and he'd asked the cook. He says, "Yes, it was burnt a little bit." He says, "Then Krishna has rejected it." And then the devotee says, "But it was made with devotion." Prabhupada said, "If it was made with devotion, it wouldn't be burnt." So devotion doesn't mean to say that we're doing things unconsciously. It means we're trying to do the best we can, and if we make some mistake, we find out how do we do it better. ABS, always better service. So no matter what your service is, you can expand unlimitedly. If your service is clean the temple every day, then that is your position. Krishna's given you that position. We're not necessarily like, I have to have a certain title after my name. That is our position. If our position is to cut the vegetables, then we become better and better at that. We try to see how can we offer this service nicer. And if we're thinking like that, Krishna will always give us ideas how to improve our service. But it's not just the external which we improve, but also the internal. How can we offer it with deeper devotion, more for the pleasure of the Lord, without any desire for expectation of some kind of recognition, etc. So just to finish off, also Srila Prabhupada remarked on his own spiritual master's words. He says, because sometimes we go to the deity for darshan, which means we want to see the deities. Actually, we're going to show ourselves to the deities. So he says, don't try to see God, but act in such a way that God will see you. So this attracts God attention, and then He will reveal Himself. If we just try to see with our own eyes, and what we're going to see, we're going to end up reverting to some acid or magic mushrooms with Him, thinking that seeing God is like some kind of trip. Prabhupada says God is not so cheap that He'll just reveal Himself, through something like that. But if we act in such a way that the Lord will see us, then He'll reveal Himself. And we will feel that connection. And like the Hoshi was pointing out, that sometimes we don't actually realise the Lord's presence until it's not there. Like in the old temple room, when the deities weren't there, they realise it's just an empty room now. And that can be there. So we take the opportunity while it's there to offer service. It's a wonderful opportunity, and we can make so much advancement and become purified. So, does anyone have anything else they'd like to share around from you?
Hopefully they're not bordering on sahaja.
I'll tell you if you are.
Yeah, there's a few experiences, so you can kind of stop me if I'm going on a bit too much. Sometimes devotees, because oh, thank you. Sometimes devotees ask the pujaris about their own sort of personal experiences of worshipping the deities, and one thing that's always kind of struck me is that because there are times when we're doing kirtan, and there are times when we're in the presence of the deities, when you really feel that they've come to life, and you really feel the presence. They reveal this effulgence that you don't always see. It's always there, but you don't always see it. And then there are certain times that they really reveal this amazing presence. And my personal experience is that on the days when I've been offering Gora Arti in the evening, and the Sankirtan devotees come back at the end of the day, after having been out all day distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, and they come into the temple room and they do kirtan at the end of the day after doing Sankirtan all day, that really seems to be the time, more than any other, that the deities show just how happy they are. And again, it's like you could just kind of take it that it's in my imagination, but it's happened so many times that I've been offering arti, and they really come to life when the Sankirtan devotees come back. They really seem to reciprocate with that service that the devotees do. And one experience that I've had quite a few times, and it's too many times now for it to just be a coincidence, is when we finish dressing the deities in the morning. Once everything's completely finished, they're dressed, the altar's been cleaned, everything's been put back in place, then we just stand there for a few moments and just look to see if anything needs to be tidied up, if anything's out of place, if there's any little last details that need to be tended to. And usually you spend at least a minute or two really looking carefully to see if there's anything that you've missed. And then once everything's done, then you get the mirror. And this has happened too many times now for it to be a coincidence. You bring the mirror so you show the deities, this is how we've dressed you today, and that's the point when you see something. It's like the deities, they're seeing themselves and they're saying, hey, what about this, what about this? You know, they show you things that you've missed, you know, and it's happened too often now to be a coincidence.
That's nice, thanks. And when the devotees have these experiences, like some of us may be able to relate to some of these stories, particularly if you haven't been on the altar to experience the mirror pastime. But the other ones is you do some nice service and you're in front of the deities and you feel that they're especially effulgent that day, or you feel their presence more. And as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, our mind can be our best friend or our worst enemy. So our mind is flickering, sometimes it's our best friend, sometimes it's our worst enemy, until it comes to the point where it's always our best friend. So when it's our worst enemy, then we become doubtful. So this is a good time to remind yourself of the times when we had some nice experience. And the Lord can show that experience to anyone. It's not like you have to be around for 3 years, 50 days, 12 minutes before the Lord's going to show anything. Simple, sincere devotional service, the Lord reveals himself.
Just one other interesting way that I've experienced the deities reciprocating, and it's not necessarily the kind of reciprocation that you would hope for, but at the same time it's the deities showing you that I'm a person. And the last thing we do at the end of the night, when we've changed the deities into their night outfits, and we leave the altar here, we turn out the lights, we lock up, and then we go around to Vrindadevi's room, we cover the shalagrams, and we turn out the light, lock the doors, and then lock the whole temple up. And there's been at least 2 occasions when I've gone home after doing that, and I have not been able to sleep a wink that night. It's like I'm just all night long tossing and turning and struggling to get to sleep, and just totally restless mind. And then when I've come back in the morning to wake the deities, I've left the light on in Vrindadevi's room. I realise, and suddenly it clicks. It's like the reason I couldn't get to sleep is because I didn't leave things nice for Vrindadevi, so she couldn't sleep properly because the lights are all night. So we don't want to be chastised, but at the same time the deities are showing us, and it's actually sweet. Even though we're getting into a little bit of trouble, it's sweet because they're showing us I'm a person and I'm reciprocating. So I can't sleep, so you're not going to be able to sleep.
That's very nice. It's nice that the deities are caring for us in this way.
And also Srila Prabhupada, he established the deities because he understood that although we could just chant Hare Krishna and that would in one sense be sufficient to go back to Godhead, but at the same time he was aware that we would need something substantial as well to supplement the chanting, and so the deities were installed in so many places, and Prabhupada had quite a high standard. And no offense to any other temples that you go to, but you do find that the more the deities are being worshipped nicely, the more present they are on the altar. They manifest their personality even more. So even though others are not directly going onto the altar to do the worship. On behalf of everybody in the community, the pujaris that go up to do the worship, they invoke the presence of the Lord. And then everybody in the vicinity, even the people who are actually living in Lesmahego, although they're not consciously aware of it, but they're living in the Holy Dham, so they're getting the benefit of all the puja that's going on. Srila Prabhupada said a nice thing. He was listening to a lecture and he was speaking to the devotees in Miami, and he said, "Now Gaura Nitai have come, and you should look after them nicely." He said, "Worshipping Radha Krishna is a little bit more difficult." He said, "But Nitai, Gauranga are very merciful, and all you have to do is dance and sing in front of them, and that is sufficient. They'll be pleased if you just do that." Which is nice.
That's actually the recommended Prabhupada's showing us the scriptural recommendation for worshipping the Lord in Kali Yuga, simply by chanting the holy names. Chanting, dancing and feasting, and everything else is simply a detail to support that, or to facilitate others to be able to come and do that, to learn about Krishna. Anyone have anything else?
And Srila Prabhupada was looking at some boys, they were in the bins, and they were trying to eat some food in India, and Srila Prabhupada was crying to see them because they were so hungry, And Srila Prabhupada said to his servant, these boys were Brahmins in their last lives, and they had shalagrams, and because they didn't arrange for someone to feed the shalagrams when they died, now they are starving. So we have to make sure that the deities are looked after when we're no longer here.
It's typical that when we water the branches of the tree and the tree doesn't get nourished properly, so when we look after ourselves and we ignore the deities, then things can start to diminish. But we put the deities in the centre, just like we water the centre of the tree, the root, then the whole tree will nourish. It'll be healthy. So Krishna being the source of all life, when we serve him, we act to please him, then automatically we're pleased. We don't have to go out of our way to try to please ourselves separately. And the more we put that into practice, then more we experience that, and then our faith develops more and more. There was one pastime, we'll just finish with this unless someone has anything else. When Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda were actually physically on planet, there was one devotee called Gauridas Pandit, and Gaur Nitai had gone to visit him, and the Vedic custom is that when you go to visit someone, when you leave, then you have to ask permission of your host to leave. So they asked permission, and as usual they expected, yes, okay. They said, no, you can't leave. He says, what do you mean? We've got a whole, we have to go and do things. He says, I don't care. He says, you're here now, I don't want you to go. He says, but we have a whole worldwide mission, we came here for this purpose. He says, not my problem. And so he says, well, you really want to leave, then you have to make some deities. He says, no, but no deities until we leave. He says, okay, that's your choice, you have to stay then, I don't give permission to leave. So he said, okay, we'll make deities and then we can go. Is that okay? He says, yeah, okay then. So then Gaur Nitai arranged that someone carried the deities, and the deities were on the altar, and then they were ready to go. He says, okay, happy now, you give us your permission to leave. He said, and Gaur Nitai said, so you're non different from the deity is non different from you? Yes. So by worshipping the deity and serving the deity, it's the same as worshipping and serving you? Yes. Okay, then you stay and deities can go. And so the Gaur Nitai says, okay, so they jumped up on the altar and the deities came off and went away. And they were about to go and said, no, deities stay, you go. And then he got so confused because he couldn't tell the difference, and then eventually he just fainted in ecstasy. And it didn't matter because the lesson was there was that Gaur Nitai and the deities are not different. So this is a wonderful pastime. Of course it's a bit more elaborate than that, but I'm just briefly explaining that pastime. And then there's another pastime, of course, when the father had left the son to make an offering to the deities, and because he was going to do some business,
So the son, young boy, had been left to do the offering. He'd made some sweets to be offered to the deities. So he put the offering there in front of the deities and said, okay, eat. And of course nothing happened. He says, eat. And then so eventually what happened was the father came back and his father says, oh, where's the maha from the deities? And he said, nothing left, the deities ate it all. And he thought, this rascal boy, he's ate all the sweets himself. He didn't even offer them to the deities a bit, yeah. So one time again he had to do the same thing, he left the boy in charge, same thing happened, he came back, there was no maha prasad left, it was all gone. He said the same story, he says, no, the deities ate it all. And he says, oh, this boy is such a rascal, I'm going to catch him out. So he pretended he was going on a business trip, and then he hid somewhere where he could see him. He says, okay, you make the offering, I'm going on a business trip. And then he hid, and then he seen the boy, he had a stick, and he was telling the deity, you eat those sweets, I'll get in trouble if you don't accept them. And then his father realised that the deity is actually eating the sweets personally, physically. And he realised that this boy has seen the Lord so personally, and that the deity would actually reciprocate according to his wish. So of course we have a choice here, we can doubt these things or we can believe in it, and if we believe in it then perhaps we'll see it ourselves. But I don't want to see any pujaris on the altar with sticks. They'll tell the deities to eat. If they do that they will get in trouble. Okay, so before we do the thing kirtan, I would just like to make a few thanks. So thanks to everybody for all their service here, because everyone's service is significant. Whatever you're doing is significant in the Lord's eyes. It's not that one service is more significant than others. Just like if you have a machine, so many cogs, or you have a watch and there's so many little cogs and wheels in it, it's not that the big one's important but the small one isn't. You take one out, the whole thing doesn't work. So everyone's service is interconnected and it all works to serve the Lord and the purposes which we're here to serve this mission. But I just wanted to name a few particular things, seeing how it's the 25th anniversary and the devotees have made some nice arrangement on the altar. So, yeah, first of all, would like, as I said, like to thank everyone for their service every day anyway, whatever they're doing. So many varieties of services, and some of us are doing one thing, some of us are doing many different things. But it's all seen by the Lord and appreciated by the Lord. So regarding today, actually, I'd like to thank for doing the curtains, the blue ones around the back here. We had the same kind of brown ones for many, many years. We only had one set of curtains there, and so we'd like to thank Laura for taking a lot of time to do this nice service there. And also helping with the outfit. The deities have a new outfit, quite a special, very intense devotion required for making that outfit. So Jagal Priya, Laura and Krima Sundar for making that lovely outfit. And with the altar decorations, we'd like to thank Sudha, Amita and Veda for making this lovely flower arrangement. Looks like a flower boat or something. And also at Hoxha and Paddy for helping decorate the altar yesterday. And the vases were done by Jagannath Priya, was it?
Yeah, and your wife also showed how to compose them nicely.
Yeah, they're amazing vases. And of course, Shuddha, Amrita and Veda for making the nice garlands, which they're doing right now as well. Even on their day off, they come and make the garlands. It's constant devotion. And did anybody sponsor anything?
Kumud Jain from the Catholic sponsor the feast.
So we'd like to thank Kumud Mataji for sponsoring today's feast for the pleasure of the deities and Lord Ramachandra and the Vaishnavas, all the guests in Vrinda.
Neha and family and Smita and Ravi
Neha and family and Smita and Ravi for providing Boga. Meta? Ravi Meta?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks Ravi. And hope that if you're on there, thank you very much for your service and hope you're all keeping well. So if anyone get any questions, comments or anything else you'd like to share?
Well, Scott Ingram as well gave 50 pounds donation. Scott Ingram gave a donation.
Is Scott online?
I don't know.
I would like to thank Scott for his nice donation. I would like to thank all the devotees here for all their daily dedications, day after day, week after week, year after year, for those who are here for some time. And keep on serving and deepening your relationship with Shashi, Koda, Nitai, Mayapura, Shashi, and pass on that nectar to others who come along. So if we, whatever we have, Prabhupada says, that we can simply just share whatever we experience in Krishna consciousness with others. In this way, the Krishna consciousness movement will expand. Shashi, Koda, Nitai, Mayapura, Shashi ki
Jai.
Shri Ramachandra Bhagwan ki
Jai.
Prabhupada ki
Jai.
ISKCON ki
Jai.
And now we'd just like to, before we have the last kirtan, we have a certificate to award Bhakti Kat or Ekaterina Siddiq. Is that how you pronounce your name? Yeah, Siddiq. So we'd just like to offer this Bhakti Yoga Level 4 certificate, which means the standard of Level 4 is
12 rounds.
12 rounds a day.
Yeah. And she's been following this standard for a year already, so it's well deserved.
Following the standard for a year.
Yes.
And also reading certain books and following certain principles.
Yes.
And soon the next level will be level 5, which means we're on the way to initiation. So we'd like to thank Kat for her wonderful service while she's here and keeping up her Krishna consciousness even at home, which is a very difficult thing to do, away from the temple. Within the temple, the atmosphere carries you along, doesn't it? But back home, the atmosphere is it's like trying to run up the escalator which is going down. It takes a lot more effort. Anyone who's ever tried to do that, they know how. That's why some of us live at the temple, because we know we couldn't manage it outside, so you're doing better than most of us, wouldn't we? So, would you like to come in and receive a certificate?
Bravo!
Is Deity Garland anywhere?
There is awesome.
It's okay, it's fine. This is enough. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
If we keep doing what we're doing, then we'll always be able to keep doing that. If we're worried about, I'll still be a devotee in a year's time, just keep doing what you're doing, and Krishna will help. Whatever Krishna will make up for what we lack, and He'll carry what we have. And the thing about sadhana bhakti is that regardless of how the mind feels, then we just keep on doing this regulated devotional service. In due course of time, this is transcending the mind, conquering the mind. The mind says, do this, do that. We say, no, I'm doing this. Even if the mind's going crazy, still I'm going to chant my rounds, still I'm going to do my reading, etc. And in due course of time, the mind becomes quiet. It's not getting the attention it wants, so it just quietens down, and it becomes our friend more and more.
That was 2 steps that Kat made. It was level 2 last time she got it. How long ago was that?
It was 2 years ago.
No.
This is my 3rd year in Krishna consciousness now. Start of the 3rd year.
Very good. This is following in the footsteps of Lord Brahma, or following the recommendations. He says that Krishna consciousness is achieved through progressive steps. In due course of time, there'll be no connection with the material world, no karma, simply will just be pure devotional service. You'll be back in the spiritual world.
Running to Krishna, not stepping. Not making steps, running to Krishna.
Yeah, and also when we take steps to Krishna, we take promises. We take 1 step to Krishna, He takes 10 towards us. We don't realise it because we don't see Krishna run down the street going like that. But there's many examples of it when people have been frustrated in life and they find a book in some unusual circumstance, and even sometimes devotees at their wit's end and something happens which just lifts them up and carries them on. So just keep good association in that way. The same for all of us. We keep good association, we'll be able to continue in our devotional service. So we'd now like to ask Vrinda to sing, and Lady Vasi Ram, and Hare Krishna.
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Hare Jaya Koda Nitai Jaya Mayapura Sachi 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 Jaya Shri Tulsina Shri Tulsina Shri Tulsina Jaya Shri Tulsina Jaya Gini Tani Ram Jaya Gini Tani Ram Gini Tani Ram Jaya Gini Tani Ram Jaya Brenda TV Jaya Brenda TV Brenda TV Jaya Brenda TV Nitai Gaur Premanandi Kiva Jayo Jayo Gora Chanderaro Tiko Shoba Janavita Tavane Jagamanalaba Janavita Tavane Ekate Advaita Shri Vasa Chatradhara Vasi Ache Gora Chandratna Simhasane Haroti Korena Brahma Adi Devagane Haroti Korena Brahma Adi Devagane Nara Hari Adi Kori Chamara Dulaya Sanjaya Mukunda Vasu Goshadigaya Shankar Bhaje Ganta Bhaje Bhaje Karatala Madhuramridanga Bhaje Paramarasala Ahu Koti Chandra Jini Vadana Ujvala Dala Deshe Banamala Kore Jalamala Shiva Shukanarada Preme Gadagada Bhakti Vinoda Dekhe Koda Sampada Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Ashakya Deshatarine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Garanga, Nitai Garanga. Nitai Garanga, Nitai Garanga. Jaya Sachinandana Gaurari. Jaya Sachinandana Gaurari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Koda Nitai Maya, Mayapura Shashi Jaya. Koda Nitai Jaya, Mayapura Shashi. Jaya Koda Nitai Mayapura Shashi.
Jaya Vishnupal Paramahamsa Parivrajika Acharya Ashtatara Shishi Man His Divine Grace A.C.Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Shishaga Prabhupada Ki Jai Prem Sri Krishna Chaitanya Brahmanachananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gauda Bhattarinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopagopanav Shamakun Radhikun Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Kangamanjamanamai Ki Jai
Bhakti Devi Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Shri Brihatvidanga, Shri Harinama Sankirtan Ki Jai, Shri Nitai Mayapura Shashi Ki Jai, Shri Ramachandra Bhagavan Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Pralada Lada Dayane. Hiranyakashipu Vakshaha. Shila Tankana Kalaye. Shila Tankana Kalaye. Ito Nisinga Parato Nisinga. Ito Nisinga Parato Nisinga. Yato Yato Yamitato Nisinga. Yato Yato Yamitato Nisinga. Nesingamadim Sharanam Prapade. Tavakara Kamalavare Nakamaduta Shringa Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringa Keshavadita Narahari Rupa Jagadish Hare Jaya Jagadish Hare Jaya Jagadish Hare Kavatara Dalita Hiranyakashipu Keshavadita Narahari Rupa Jagadish Hare Jagadish Hare Keshavadita Narahari Rupa Jagadish Hare Jaya Jagadish Hare Jaya Jagadish Hare Keshavadita Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj. Shri Nrsimha Bhagavan Ki Jai, Shri Prahlad Maharaj Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Thank you very much for attending the festival, all our people here physically and astrally on the online. And now the next part of the program will be to show our respects to the Lord's mercy in the form of prasadam. Shri Mahaprasadam ki.